So we are pleased to welcome Professor Giovanni Vecchi to Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna di Pisa. Giovanni Vecchi is Professor of Economics at Università Tor Vergata in Rome. Thank you for having joined us in this INET initiative. Professor Vecchi, one of your research interests is focused on inequality. Inequality is somehow the fashionable topic in leftist circles in Europe and the United States. Its success powered by Piketty's Capital of the 21st Century. However, some authors, such as Dieter McCloskey, have been quite critical on the contents of the book, claiming, for example, that it neglects human capital as an important measure. In your opinion, is inequality a passing fad or a serious trend and question worth discussing?
That's an easy question. Inequality certainly matters, so it's not something that should be dismissed as a passing fad or something. We have been studying and interested in inequality since a long time, I mean economists. And perhaps what has gained momentum after Piketty's work has been the concern over the long run. We were well aware, we have been aware that inequality was on the rise in many countries. What now we are thinking is whether, when we look at the long run, whether there is something historically unprecedented, right? Piketty's work has been praised for many different reasons. One is that certainly give perspective, right? Give perspective to the analysis and give us a sense of whether what we are going through, it's new. And his message is kind of disruptive because it suggests that we are heading to 19th century, which is something that scares people to death, not just the right, but the left as well. So this is an issue that is important because if Piketty is right, we should all be sort of paying a lot of attention to inequality. Now, what we think is that perhaps, according to other data that I've been examining in the last years, inequality is certainly on the rise, but is not reaching the levels that were observed in the 19th century. So it's something that we should be worried about because of the many links that it has with economic growth, with the democracy and so forth. But I would not agree in sharing the concern that we are back to 19th century. And we are better equipped, we have tools to reverse the trend or to mitigate or to slow down the trend, so I should not be worried at all. For sure, it's important at some point to figure out who's right, to face with the details of our measurements, right? So to dig with, to just investigate whether the data, the sources, and the methods have been chosen carefully. And that's an issue that is not popular, is not something that people like to talk about, but I think it really matters. So we need to go to the appendices to look at the small cap, small font, footnotes to see who's right and whether the measurement has been carried out properly.
In this sense, in your opinion, what is lacking in the current debate on inequality?
Well, one striking thing is that all scholars seem to pay very little attention on a couple of things. One is poverty. I can't claim it for sure, but I don't think that in his book you can find, in his book, I mean Piketty's book, you can find one single time the word poverty. Poverty is never mentioned. And this is, to me, as a welfare analyst, is a big under-researched field. We know very little on the evolution of poverty over the long run. And we certainly should care about poverty for obvious reasons. The second concern that I have is the unidimensionality of the analysis, right? Because of the constraints that we have from the data that are available, then we are focusing our efforts as economic historians or economists on monetary variables, right? It might be incomes, it might be expenditures, it might be wealth, but it's unidimensional. Well, it's kind of trivial that living standards are inherently multidimensional, and therefore my answer is, well, we should make an effort to combine monetary variables with non-monetary ones, and to bring in life expectancy, education, environment, housing conditions, and many other aspects that contribute to the living standards. So multidimensionality is really another topic that is awaiting scholars in the near future for further investigation.
Just to further this idea, how can we measure in a multidimensional setting inequality, and are there any difficulties in calculating inequality over a long period of time with multidimensional tools?
Well, I think that if there is a consensus among different scholars, is that the main difficulty is data availability. So it's something that is not very noble, or but data is really what we lack. I myself, I'm exploring the use of household budgets as an historical source. Household budgets contains both standard measures like income, expenditures on consumption and services, and also wealth, but also contains plenty of information on people's life. So for many, many decades, for some reason, the common belief was that household budgets were not enough, were not available. Household budgets are a creature of the post-World War II in most countries, right? They are not available typically for periods prior to the Second World War. In fact, if you dig enough, if you have time and money enough to dig in the archives and other sources, you will be surprised to realize how many household budgets are available. They are not a sample, they are not a statistical sample, but we have tools for transforming these collections of household budgets that are available in thousands or hundreds of thousands worldwide, can tell us much, much more and more in depth about what's going on to living standards over time and their distribution as well.
So you would suggest to expand this analysis to other countries in order to build a bigger data set? It would be cross-country or something like that. And are there any difficulties in doing that? I mean, you said, for example, it is not a statistical sample per se, with some qualities probably. Would you say something about these limits that are found when working with family budgets?
Sure. We explored this with the case of Italy. Italy, there is no reason. Italy was created on March 17, 1861, right? There is no reason that it was a poor country in the periphery of the world, and there is no reason to believe that Italy should be considered as household budget abundant. There is no reason at all. After a few years of investigation, we found about 20,000 household level records for Italy over a century. And we were able to connect this information with the modern surveys that have been carried out by the National Statistical Institute. So in the case of Italy, the main limitation was time and money. Archives, libraries, households themselves are places that contain plenty of household budgets. Once you find the means, the ways of collecting enough household budgets, then the challenge becomes how to transform a collection of household budgets into a statistical sample. How can you claim that your collection of household budgets is representative of the national population, so that you end up with, or you can hope to obtain estimates that are representative at the national level. This is where we need some extra information, so for information that comes outside from the sample. And we have explored the use of population censuses. Population censuses are available for most countries for many, many times and epochs, and they provide information that is required to put in balance your collection of household budgets, what you are lucky enough to find in the archives, and to transform them by means of creating weights or expansion factors. You can transform your collection into statistical samples. And then the evidence, what we have been able to accomplish with the case of Italy, suggests that this is a viable solution that can be applied to other countries. In the end, we have been able to estimate inequality and also poverty for Italy over 150 years using a consistent source, household budgets, a consistent method, something that, in my opinion, it's worth the attention from other countries. That if you think of Germany or Russia or the United States, for sure, our a priori expectation is that they are much, much richer than Italy in terms of data available or household budgets that are in the archives somewhere in the country. So what has been possible for Italy, my guess is that should be certainly possible for other countries, provided we believe in this new research strategy.
New tool and exportable one. Thank you, Professor.
Has been my pleasure. Thank you.